Okay. You know, I look around the room and I'm pretty happy because it's not, I expected that there might be some attrition, but I guess for those of you who are local, the appeal of that actual cocktail that's been luring out there for a while may be strong. So for the last but not least, the coup de grace, the pièce de résistance, we will have a conversation about digital labor as a catalyst for transformation. Inside of 5 years, many of our colleagues will not be human, and that will be the norm. So try to get your head around that. The relationship between man and machine will no longer be the domain of science fiction movies, all of which I loved. Now I sort of freak out as I watch them, and I'm going to put in another plug for Transcendence if you haven't seen it. The old operating system for business has now reached a saturation point, replacing people with cheaper people. While it was particularly powerful, it's run its course. Not that it's going away anytime soon, but it's certainly not the main driver any longer. We're now seeing a radically different future, and we will see a digital workforce. This is a revolution or an evolution, however you want to see it, that can be embraced and not feared. As we talked about earlier today, in the advent of the farming industry in this country went from 90% to 1%. The automotive industry seems to have survived, and I think the rest of us will survive this as well. Our speaker today is eminently qualified to speak on this subject. Edwin Van Bommel is responsible for IPsoft's cognitive business and its digital agent, Amelia, who we will have the pleasure of meeting a little bit later. He has a long and distinguished career, 16 years with McKinsey. So coming from one of the finest management consulting firms in the world, and was a founding partner in the McKinsey digital world, a precursor to today's digital environment that we find everyone moving to. So with that, without further ado, I guess I should also tell you he has 2 master's degrees in case you didn't think he was smart before he got up here because he worked for McKinsey. So with that, Edwin, please join me on stage and welcome Edwin.
Good. Welcome, everybody. Let me quickly move. Where did you hide the presentation? Okay, let me start. He will pop up the presentation. So, yeah. So, welcome, everybody. I'm very glad, first of all, that you really take the time to be here somewhere at the end of probably a very tough working week. When I heard for the first time, Edwin, you're going to present at IAOP, I was like, oh, that's great, that's fantastic. When is it? Friday afternoon, 4:15. So, okay. Thank you. But still, there's a lot of turnout, and I hope indeed that the alcohol we promised is helping here. So, so bear with me. If it's boring, then there is alcohol afterwards. What I'm going to talk to you about a bit is indeed the whole digital transformation and how AI actually is transforming our world. And I will start first with what do we see in the outside world, and how does that actually already apply to some of the companies we all know. And I will then transition more into, okay, but how does Amelia, our cognitive platform, actually fit into it? And how will it change customer experience? And also I'll take a step back and how will it change actually your organizations, to then show Amelia. And at the end, we're open for questions, of course. So if we look at some companies we know very well, and I'm mainly going to talk actually about Amazon, is then these new companies which started around 15, 20 years ago, especially Amazon, versus the companies we know for a much longer time, there is one core difference. And the core difference is they have technology at the core. These companies are built around technology. And what you see is that in terms of market performance, they really outperform the traditional companies. So if you look at Amazon, it's around 4 times revenue to come to their market valuation. Whereas if you take Walmart, it is revenue divided by 2. And I actually was last week talking to a couple of analysts who really went deep into Amazon. And they also explained, so look, it's all around their technology, and especially around their Prime membership, where most of the intelligence is actually built around. And if you look actually what happened recently with the whole Whole Foods acquisition, right? And you compare them, and you then actually also look at Amazon Go, which are the shops which they're currently testing still more internally. In those shops, there's a lot of AI, which is going to drive the physical shopping experience, and all the analysts are convinced that that will actually be implemented in Whole Foods as well within a year or two. But the Amazon, we all know, where we go online, you actually, everything you see, right, the offers, the prices, etc., are all determined by their computers, by their analytic engines, by their AI. But if you order something, also the routing and which delivery company will get it is all determined by computers as well. So there's very limited what's happening there which is not steered by a computer. There are still humans really doing execution tasks, but even their picking list is optimized by a computer. And if you think about that and you talk about the company of the future, it's built around this platform, this core platform. And I will come back on how AI fits in there, but AI is at the heart of this. And again, what I just said is this core platform really runs the operations. It might execute directly to end consumers or to suppliers, or it just runs the day-to-day business of employees. There's a very important thing. If you all think about transforming your own company, about advising companies what to do, it is all about, okay, but these platforms are actually steered still by humans. I mean, it's not that it's completely unsupervised learning. But what people often think is that this smart team is a technical team, and it's actually not. It's actually the business team of the future, which is extremely technically savvy. Because all the algorithms, all the parameters within which the machine operates will determine your margin. So actually they determine the business rules with which the platforms are being run, and which then lead to the whole day-to-day execution. And that is actually what we see happening now with all newer companies. And this is why the more traditional companies have a hard time keeping up, because this is a big, big architectural difference. And yes, there's all kinds of regulations which is protecting banking and insurance. There's all kinds of other loyalty related to branding, maybe in retail, but still, look at what Amazon has done, and most of the other startups as well. Look, for instance, at Lemonade and the valuation of Lemonade, and the fact that Allianz is super interested in Lemonade here in New York, the insurance company. Again, because it's completely AI driven. And this is actually how, if you take a step back and look more to technology, this is actually what happens. You have the systems of engagement. Those are the systems we all work with. Those are the systems which are on I see someone behind his computer, online, on your mobile, etc. You have your systems of record. They keep the records. It's your SAP, it's your core banking system, it's your core insurance system. And then there's the data platform, which has a lot of the data around your business. And in the middle, and I've positioned here Amelia, but in the middle is your AI, because your AI can steer the customer interactions, can work with your data, and needs actually to work with your backend system to be effective. And with Amelia, that's what we are doing. We're putting Amelia actually in the middle of this whole thing. And then are 5 elements needed to make that effective. The first one is conversational intelligence. So what you see is actually that you need to interact with your customers completely steered, in this case by AI. So Amelia is only effective when she really understands what you want and takes all the smart assumptions to make sure that she understands the whole context of what you're talking about. So if you start, for instance, with, I just had an accident here at the corner of 17 State Street, and Amelia will then say, okay, I can help you with that. And the first question is again, okay, where did the accident happen? You already told that. So she needs to be context aware and actually not ask you that again, like you would expect from a smart human. So that's one of the examples around conversational intelligence. But we need to work with the data as well. This is where smart analytics come in. You have the accident, but did you really have an accident, or are you actually trying to commit fraud? And this is where the analytics come in. So I, for instance, in my previous job, did a lot of fraud analytics. I can tell you an accident on an industrial area at 3 o'clock at night is quite fishy. So you can actually, based on what customers tell you, say, hey, this might be a fraudulent situation, and steer the discussion by asking a couple of more clarifying questions, or immediately escalate to a human if you really think it might be fraud. And this is in the same example where advanced analytics come in, and where actually the AI can steer based on the data. And this is, for instance, one of the examples we have in another industry, what we do. And then there's smart workflow. If you want to run a process, you need to actually be able to run a workflow. And if I take a step back, one of the differences between Amelia and a chatbot is she actually can run this complete end-to-end workflow. And that means that, for instance, if you have the accident and you want to do the claim, she can completely handle that claim, the whole intake. And the reason why it's not workflow but smart workflow is she needs to integrate with all the systems which are needed. And when she knows elements, she can just skip steps and not ask you these all unnecessary questions. And then you have the whole experience management, which is making sure that end-to-end it all works. And this is where the end-to-end automation is coming from. And then you need to train an AI. And that's a big difference with an IT platform. You don't program it, you train it. And we'll show you a couple of examples later on with Anthony how you train that platform. So here you see the whole ecosystem around such a smart platform and what is needed to make that a success. And to really automate your companies at the core. And how it actually will change more from a customer experience is what you see here. Because normally you have clients, vendors, employees, they all access in different levels your company. If you have an AI, you can put that much more at the center, and the AI will understand, based on the intent, what are the right backend systems to work with. What is the right way actually to help someone with this problem? And you get much more from a conversational and interaction perspective, the AI at the center. And I just gave you a client example. An employee example might be, look, I'm feeling sick today. Can I just take a sick day? You just tell the AI, and the AI will send all the emails and all the other things which you normally would have to handle. You might be a manager, and you might say, look, actually, what were the sales results of last week in the UK? And the AI would look up, by the way, I'm going to travel to Hong Kong. What are actually the meal tickets I can charge when I travel to Hong Kong? And those are the type of elements you can get. And you can basically get standardized platforms. We call the last one, we call it one office, where you just don't need to look anymore for what's the right system to do. And you have one point of conversation, one point of contact who will take you through. Oh. And then there's one other aspect, and that is called cross-channel. So for instance, this is what Amelia does, and we have native apps. You can contact Amelia through the Echo, through all these other platforms you see here. But again, this is all about making sure it's very easy to work with, making sure that she's not only well trained, but also very easy to find. Because one thing we learned from our implementations is Amelia can be brilliant. I mean, we often are, in terms of, I'll come back to the next page, but we often are really high in our level of understanding. But if people cannot find her, she can actually not help you. So this is why we are so easy to reach. So you can talk to Amelia on your mobile. You can actually, if you look, for instance, use Skype for Business, reach her there. We have her, for instance, on Slack. So you can really work with Amelia on the platforms where you normally work with. And she becomes one of your colleagues you can reach out to, instead of something completely separate. And then you have a conversational engine, which is easy to find and actually helps you end to end. And this is where the economic value really comes from. And then you talk about what is now the business impact. And if you look at what are the drivers, you again see here the five. On the top you see the 5 elements which I explained earlier. But the economic equation you have to watch out for in your own company or the companies you advise is, it's first of all about great user experience. And the reason why great user experience is important is you want to have repeat usage. People who try once and who don't like Amelia, they don't come back. So I can have great automation, but if people don't use it, there's no impact. The second element is full automation, and we really mean back-to-back automation. If Amelia does back-to-back automation, it's not only that she takes the conversation out, she takes actually all the work out which happens normally after the conversation. And if Amelia cannot do it completely, we can integrate Amelia. We have a use case, a couple of use cases by now, where actually Amelia is working together with the Blue Prism or with an automation anywhere and does the full fulfillment, where she keeps the control of the whole process. Then you have optimal decisions. This is where the analytics comes in. I can do a claim intake, but if there's fraud, then it's probably not the best thing I can do. Other example is service to sales. Amelia does help a client, and the client is super enthusiastic, and there's next action to take, which is to upgrade, for instance, an investment account. Amelia can propose that and handle that process as well. So what we now do is actually also have Amelia more in action in sales processes. So for instance, for one of the largest American insurers, Amelia does the whole quotation process. We're now live for a couple of weeks, and you see that actually the results are actually staggering. She's super successful in completing those quotes and converting them really to sales. And this is where the optimal decisions come in, because there's a lot of decision making involved also in those type of processes. And then those first three elements are all about creating impact. But that creating impact comes at a cost. And one of the criticism of which people have against AI, that it's extremely tough to train the AI. And this is where the fast and efficient training comes from. And what we have done with release number 3 is we have automated actually a lot of the training. So now if you feed Amelia with a couple of utterances, she will say, hey, is this a credit card number? Do I now need to ask for a credit card number in these cases? Is this actually a zip code? Is this a name? Is the name very important? So that she only asks for confirmations if she understands the job she has to do, instead of that you have to train it from scratch. And this is the next big wave, is that actually the AI will much more and more start training itself. There will, in our case, always be a human supervising it. We just don't like rogue learning. But again, the AI becomes smarter and can make itself smarter, and then you actually get the additional reward for it. So that's in short what's happening. Now, if you then look, for instance, to where there's robotics and AI combined, and you roll that out, for instance, in a bank or in an insurance company, you already have seen, for instance, in insurance, that companies who are leaders in digital versus non-leaders in digital, that their expense ratio is dramatically different. Expense ratio of 26% versus 32%. Right? 26 for the digital leaders. But now with AI and RPA combined at scale, you will get another significant chunk. And my expectation is that it's even bigger than what has happened in the recent digitization wave. So the financial impact will be huge, but this time it will not only be around expenses or costs, it will be much more also around sales and lower what I would call risk costs. So for instance, lower claims or lower credit risk in an insurance company because of the analytics and all the learning which is involved in that. What I want to do now is to show you a bit of Amelia, because this is all like, okay, this is great, and Edwin is a former consultant, so nice study. But let me show you a couple of real examples, both around how conversational you can get, for instance, in banking. And then we'll show you a couple of examples of learning. And this is Anthony. He is one of our lead architects here in New York. And we'll together take you through of these examples.
Cool. Hi, everybody. I can't help but thank whoever it was that scheduled me before the drinks. I know you guys are waiting for me to finish, but I've got some cool stuff to show you. Actually, it's always about drinks, isn't it? Anyway, So let's go through some stuff here, and let's look at Amelia. First and foremost, though, what I've got on the screen right there is an example of what our web UI looks like. It's the most traditional way in which people think of approaching, an AI type thing, front-end chat. But the problem is, as soon as I show this, you think of the word chatbot, and we take a grievance to the word chatbot at IPsoft. And so what I'm here to do today is to show you how we are more than just a chatbot and how we are actually a virtual agent, which is the next space in digitization and the evolution of essentially what was chatbot technology turning into more cognitive, Turing test beatable technology, let's say. And so how do we do that? There are several elements. Well, what I have here is an example, and if any of you guys have come to the booth, you may have seen this example, gone through the escalations and whatnot and seen some examples of the learning. But I think this example is a really good example, again, of conversational intelligence, which demonstrates Amelia's ability to be not only effective in fulfilling a request, but giving you a great experience while you do it. So I'm actually going to talk to Amelia as well. So, something terrible happened to me. That's what happens when you have a microphone. Hang on, let me see.
Exclusive to
There we
account
go.
and transaction inquiries, disputes, ordering checks, payments, and a variety of credit card services. What can I help you with today? Sorry to hear that. Let me guess, you lost your card?
No, actually, my card was declined. Cool.
I am sorry to hear that. Looks like we blocked your Visa card due to a suspicious charge. There was a purchase made on May 9/15 at Bunker's Bar and Grill in Vandalia OH for $14.
It's a real bar,
Did you
by the
make
way.
this charge?
So yeah, it's always at Bunker's Bar where I get declined. Anyway, so something terrible happened to me. A lot of, and you guys are going to hear the spiel if you were at the booth around some of the comparative differences between, that chatbot technology and the virtual agent technology. A lot of the command-driven bots that are on the market, you've got your Alexas, your Siris and whatnot, are extremely effective in that command-driven type work. What's the weather like in Tokyo today? Play Adele for me. Those types of things where they take an action, they do a keyword analysis on that play word, and then they'll go, Adele, oh, that's pretty cool, so they'll automatically play Adele. And it is intelligent, and it really is effective in what it does. However, if you say, don't play Adele to Alexa, she will turn around and say, okay, I'm going to play Adele, because she doesn't have context of the sentence that you're in. She's looking at the keyword and doesn't realize that don't play Adele means you should not play Adele. And so what happened to me was I said something terrible happened to me, and Amelia's not hell-bent on trying to do something and run an action for me. She actually displays an empathetic response and says, sorry to hear that, showing empathy for my situation, but not running a process because terrible could be related to some process somewhere and whatnot. And then when I said I went out last night, that could have been interpreted based off of her analysis of several other intents, like I went out last night and lost my card. That could be something that a lot of people say. So she tries to understand the intent and drive the correct process that she feels based on where the conversation is right now. But instead, she goes, I lost my card, and I go, no, actually my card was declined. And again, one of the problems you get with a lot of chatbot type technology is that once they enter a process, you can't get them out of the process. They're hell-bent on just finishing that one thing that they started, and they can't context switch. Humans can context switch. Virtual agents can context switch. And so what Amelia does is go from that you lost your card intent that she had in her mind at first, and when I clearly said no, actually my card was declined, we switched to another process altogether. And that's where, she integrated into a back-end system, identified that my Visa card was declined, and actually pulled a transaction from the database and displayed it in a relatively readable format as it came through from that system, and basically asked me to confirm the charge. So if I say, yes, I did, we'll continue the process.
Okay, thanks for confirming this. I will go ahead and unlock your card. You can begin using it right away. Can I help you with anything else?
And before you continue, so you might say, okay, guys, great demo. In Mexico, we work for a bank with over 20 million customers where Amelia does exactly this. People actually call her, not only chat, but actually call Amelia. They will say, I see a fraudulent transaction. On my credit card, Amelia will ask you from when is that transaction and ask for one or two other elements to find the transaction. She will look in the bank's back-end systems, will determine indeed if there's a big case for fraud or not. Within limits, she might even approve and already return the money back. Others will be really given to the fraud department. With extremely high, above 90 plus 99%, we're actually 98, 99% accuracy there. In 1 or 2%, she needs to escalate because she doesn't completely get what the customer wants. Just so what we show here is a demo which actually also has been delivered to another client who was actually working with this. But the other big use case is for 20 million people in Mexico where we run this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so we move on in the process and we finish it and we say, can I help you with anything else? Now this is an important piece. So with a virtual agent, they scale, right? It's AI. You can have one of them, you can have 10,000 of them. You no longer have to cater for volume changes in the amount of calls that you have. When the recent hurricanes occurred, insurance industries had to hire extra staff in order to cater for the explosive volume of calls that came in. With Amelia, you have the scalability, so you don't need to worry about that factor anymore. And so as a result, you don't have to worry about the KPI of who's taking the most tickets and closing them, or who's taking the most calls and closing them, because it doesn't really matter. The only statistic that really matters now is customer satisfaction, because now you want to get that CSAT result all the way to the top, and you leverage Amelia in order to be able to do it. So there's no pressure to hang up the phone or stop the chat. Can I help you with anything else? You can do as much as you want within the context of this conversation. I am not pressuring you in any way whatsoever to close this call. Let's talk about your kids. Let's talk about your family, where you're going this weekend. You know, it creates a much more human experience and allows you to actually be really rich in the experience that you want to offer. I'll give you another example as well as how a virtual agent can become, or Amelia, let's say, can become even a revenue generating element. So, you know, we're in a banking context right now. I transfer money between one account and the other, and I go over the limit for the minimum amount in my savings account to open a money market account. So Amelia then goes, oh, well, now you've hit the money market account threshold. You can get a higher interest rate. Would you like me to upgrade your account? They say yes. And then all of a sudden, Amelia's taken the skill set of customer care, which is unique to humans usually, and then she's gone into a little bit of the sales side, which is another skill set altogether that usually the two don't go hand in hand. And so that's an example of how you can really create not only an effective customer experience from a customer care standpoint, but then also look into areas where you could potentially drive revenue and where you can actually turn your cost centers into potential revenue builders and completely change the game when it comes to business. And we have seen that occur in several of our implementations. So when I go, I would like to transfer $5,000 to my friend Kevin Rodriguez from my checking account, because I'm very generous. It was that night at Bunker's
It
Bar.
looks like you don't have enough money in your checking account to complete this transaction. I see that you currently have $5,000 in your savings account. Would you like to use this account instead?
So Edwin made a point about this earlier. When you say, I can't remember what your example was exactly, but when you say, I bought a new car last week, and you ask somebody like, when was that? You've already said last week. You've already given the information beforehand. Amelia is able to derive those key elements of information within an intent. So kind of similar to the Play Adele kind of thing that I did with Alexa earlier, but here it is far more advanced. And it's akin to something that somebody would say if they were talking to you at a bank, or if they were on the telephone to you around what they want to do. They would say, you know, they'd be very verbose and elaborate. They wouldn't say, transfer $5,000, Kevin Rodriguez, now. You know, it's more, you know, it's more conversational than that. And so what we've done here is we've picked out the fact that I would like to transfer, has triggered the transfer goal, or paying somebody goal. $5,000, that's one slot, one intent that could be in there. To my friend Kevin Rodriguez, another one from my checking account, another one. It avoids repetition and streamlines the process. And it avoids that whole situation of her going around and saying, oh, from which account? because we've already given her that information. So if I say, oh, and the next thing she's done is she's looked at, I don't have $5,000 in my current account, I only have $650. Well, instead of saying, well, that's tough, I can't do that for you, does not compute, can't do this, whatever, she's actually turned around and not only told me that it looks like you don't have enough money to do this, but then she's also turned around and said, I've noticed that you do have $5,000 in your savings account, would you like to switch to there instead? And so now I can accept that and just be like, okay.
Sure, let's switch to your savings account. Please take a moment to review the transaction details on your right.
Anthony, if I may...
Would you like me to proceed?
So what you see, what's happening here as well, is that on the right-hand side, actually, was it me? The visual changed. And what we do with Amelia, and this is actually, in this implementation, the client didn't want to have a lot of graphical elements. We have others where we push photos, where we push a lot of other content to the right-hand rail. This is where you see that the AI becomes much more the new UI. Right? And what we're currently doing actually with a couple of banks is building their new UI, which will be this. This will be your major contact with the bank. You will have your personal banker back, but this time it's not a human. It's a machine. And the machine will drive with you the conversation, and depending on what you want, she will show you just the right content instead of throwing a lot of content in you, and within the content you have to find your way to find the right thing. So we actually turn the whole equation around and put the burden of showing you the right thing and finding the right thing actually now on the machine instead of the end user. Right? And that's the whole philosophy behind putting AI at the center of the whole communication and making AI really the new UI.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I've already spoken to a few of you guys around the fact that, you know, self-service kind of focuses that it doesn't help with the call volumes, for example. People don't want to trawl through knowledge base articles to find the answer to their problem. They're busy people. They just want to call you. They just want to get somebody to do it for them. If your computer breaks, they don't want to deal with it. They want somebody else to deal with it. So they pick up the phone, and all of a sudden you've got another call to the IT service desk. But with, you know, this type of technology whereby we actually integrate into those back-end systems and can do the processes for them while still being available via the phone, it's a win-win, right? Because we're not able to be more effective than, say, a general knowledge base article where somebody has to trawl through to find the answer. They can approach us in their natural language, and we drive not only the process and the information, but the UI in which they see it in. And so one of the things that happened there, if you noticed, was in the UI, the payment information updated on the right. The UI was driven by where we were in the process. And then we also had those buttons that were there. So in a web UI environment, I can help drive the process even further by giving things out like buttons, elements in which I can show screenshots and whatnot in order to help facilitate the whole process.
Yeah, and we made this whole UI completely responsive, right? So if you're now the client of this bank and you're on your mobile, actually the whole experience will be the same thing. The right-hand rail will be behind the chat, but you can easily switch back and forward. But the whole experience is the same. So you just have one UI which is consistent across all your channels.
Cool. So I select the button, I move forward, and the buttons disappear. And then the UI is driven again, and now...
All right, Jane. You should be all set.
My friend, Kevin,
I have sent you a receipt of the transaction to your phone and email. Kevin Rodriguez should receive the money in the next 1 to 2 business days. Let me know if there is anything I can help you with, Jane.
Okay, so I'm there, and you guys might not be able to read this because of the font, but now I go through and I see all these different transactions right here. I see mine at the top where I transferred the money, but then I look down the list and I'm like, well, I don't recognize one of these transactions. You know, and you know, if you've got your statement in front of you and you call the bank because you think there's a mischarge or something's wrong, you're not going to be like, oh, I don't recognize the charge that's about 10 lines down. It's for a value of X. You would say something like, there's a transaction, it's from like Shiloh or something like that, which is the example here. And so if I say, I don't recognize the Shiloh transaction.
Understood. Anthony Evans.
British.
Damn it. I did British English. Oh, yeah, she was trained on American English, so sometimes the British English doesn't pick up on this particular implementation. I need to train her to be better at English, but anyway. Sorry? Well, actually, yeah, if I say, sorry, I wrote in British English.
Sorry to hear that. Oh, it's fine.
It's fine.
So there we go. I don't recognize the Shiloh transaction. Actually, I usually do this demo speaking.
All right, let's get
And
this
it picks
sorted
up
out.
American English already, so I don't have to worry about the typing and whatnot.
Are you referring to the payment made to Shiloh Athletic Club Dayton OH on January 1815 for the amount of $13?
Sorry?
You had typed in, I don't recognize the Shiloh transaction. What was British about it?
I used an S instead of a Z. And they call it a Z here as well.
I see, yeah, that sounds...
It's a zebra. Anyway.
Well, actually, we are now launching we have version 3, we are now launching actually 3.1. There she will automatically switch recognizing your language, so you can even then start talking in, for instance, French, and she will understand that it's French, and she will switch languages. Yeah, so the next version actually is not an issue anymore. That's
Actually, and that's a good point, because we are deployed now, and we've had to do that through customer demand as well. Long gone are the days when you can just say, okay, English US, that's it, everybody has it, because in a website, that's easy. If it's in English US, people just go with it, it's a form. If the button's not there, the button's not there. But when you're dealing with a cognitive AI, you really need to cater for, and if it's a global implementation, you really have to cater for that nuance in the language. And so in the later versions, and the ones which are available now, you can actually even see this in real time. It just switches. So, I don't recognize the Shiloh transaction. She found it in the list. Are you referring to that payment for Shiloh? And I say yes. And she'll ensure that. And then, in order to submit it.
In order to submit this billing dispute, I need you to provide a short description of what you think is wrong with this charge and why you believe it's a mistake. Go ahead and enter your description now.
I would not be caught dead playing sports. Cool. Yeah, I'm very unhealthy.
Thanks. A ticket has been submitted for our fraud team to review. The ticket number is 0099823. You should be contacted by a representative in the next 2 business days regarding the status of this dispute. You're also welcome to contact us at any time for help with this or any other issue. For service on your existing accounts, call 1-800-AMELIA9. Our representatives are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What else can I do for you today?
So what you see here actually is a good example of not only the integration into the ticketing system in the back end. We have a lot of work with the ticketing systems like your ServiceNows of the universe and whatnot, because they still need to be a system of record, right? And so you can drive the value of your existing platforms while still having people in a unified engagement through the Amelia platform, which enables you to streamline a lot of your reporting. You've got things like performance analytics that you may do across the business, measure KPIs, and if it is something like a service desk that you're looking to implement Amelia on, you can see in real time side-by-side reporting of what Amelia is doing versus what the human agents are doing, and where you can go and pick out your next processes that you want to give to Amelia to take on, and that you want to automate from a cognitive standpoint. Now, there's one last thing as well, in that if you notice, it was a very scripted kind of output. A lot of people get afraid when they're like, oh, cognitive, it learns, Skynet, I've seen the Terminator and all this kind of stuff. But you do have the possibility to be more prescriptive in the way that you present information to your clients. So if you want them at the end of a process to be aware of something, like this is a fraud case, I need to present a ticket number, a telephone number, and make sure you tick all the boxes from an audit and compliance standpoint, you still can do that. There's the good flexibility and the bad flexibility. You don't want the AI asking people out on dates and stuff. You want to be able to have some elements of control. And Amelia is built on an approval engine as well. So even though the machine learning elements are there and we do automate a lot of the processes, you still have the ability to ensure that you are in control of the experience that your clients face. So.
All right, I have listed the nearest ATMs on your right. Is there anything else I can help you with?
So I just said, where is the nearest ATM in Midtown Manhattan? I need to go get some money now because I've transferred it, gave it all at Bunker's Bar the other night. And again, another example of me giving information proactively by saying an ATM in Midtown Manhattan. Actually, funny story about this one. So I was on the phone with Spectrum customer service. Great experience, I can tell you. And I was talking to this girl, and I said, well, I needed to go to the Spectrum store. And I go, where is the nearest one? And she goes, oh, where are you? I go, New York City. And she goes, oh, let me look that up for you. She goes, there's one on Broadway, there's one on Fifth Avenue. And I'm like, are you really looking up New York City as like a location for Spectrum stores? Like, do you think we just walk around the corner and like, oh, I'm on Broadway and like whatever? But that's a funny experience. But like, this is an example of how you can overcome that and have a consistent experience. Because I said, what is the ATM in Midtown Manhattan? She looked up Midtown Manhattan, did an API call, and pulled back some ATMs that are over there. And I say thanks.
Sure, no problem.
And everything is good.
So if you now take a step back, right, and look again at the economic equation, right? So this is a user experience where actually you always have all the help you need. I don't need to navigate, right? So I don't need to understand, okay, where's the button on the web page for nearest ATM? Now I need to do a payment. Where can I do that? You all have everything at hand on your mobile, right? So from user experience, I would say tick the box. The next one was end-to-end automation. Well, obviously this is banking, so banking is already highly automated. But we have this same experience, for instance, where suppliers are being helped by Amelia to just check if their invoice is being paid. Right? So instead of having a representative on the phone, they now can just chat with Amelia, and Amelia will check if it's paid or not. Moreover, she actually will look up, before you even have started with Amelia, the last 3 payments and put them on the right-hand side. So you might already not ask your question anymore. And if your invoice actually is not paid, you can actually submit your invoice again through Amelia. Taking out a lot of, again, manual labor for a conversational type of support. Then the other one was everything around analytics, right? And so behind, for instance, the whole credit card element, you can put a lot of fraud. So, for instance, for another very large company where people have to log in to get the services, we actually do a lot of fraud detection for them. So we first determine if you are really you. Because there's a lot of account theft in that industry. Amelia catches a very high fraud. She's probably better than the humans, where the customer satisfaction rate is incredibly high. It's 86%. The humans are at 88%. So that is neglectable, while actually really finding more fraud than what humans do. Using these analytics while having the conversations with their clients. Right, so here you see the first 3 elements out of the 4 around the economic equation for Amelia. And what we want to focus now on is actually the 4th one, which was the learning. Right? So how hard is it now really to train an AI platform? I will show you a couple of examples.
Yeah, so with Amelia, the 5 core elements that differentiate her from a chatbot, let's say, and into that virtual agent space is that we've approached this from a different philosophy than a lot of other companies that are out there. We don't approach this from a big data standpoint. I'm not going to stand here and say, hey, give me all your data and I'll get you some value out of it through conversational intelligence. I'm actually more interested in, staying with your back-end systems like we've discussed at depth. But we approached it from a philosophical standpoint. I liked Chetan's example of this yesterday. Chetan Dubey is our CEO. He basically said that when you approach something from the theory, if you take, for example, flying, when people first started to learn to want to fly, they started flapping their wings, right? And you see the first people flapping, building contraptions and whatnot. But the minute they stepped back and looked at the theory of flying, then that's when you see modern aviation take off and you actually achieve what you're supposed to achieve. We approached Amelia from a conversational AI standpoint with 5 guiding principles. First of all, you've got your semantic memory, the things that you're picking up in a conversation. The last 20 or so minutes that I've been up here, you're going to recollect jokes, you're going to see things about my life, you're going to know I love Bunker's Bar and all that kind of stuff. And that's example of you picking out various words and thoughts and whatnot based on the conversation that we're having and the presentation that we're giving. Then you've got your episodic memory. When I see one of you maybe in the future, whatever, you'll be like, oh, you were that guy at that one presentation who talked about Bunker's Bar. They're going to remember Bunker's Bar all the time. But anyway, but that's an example of episodic memory. In business context, it could be something as simple as customer care. You call in and you say, I just bought a blue car, can I get it insured? Okay, Amelia runs the process, calls back a month later, I just totaled my car, and Amelia goes, oh, what, the blue one? Because she's able to recollect from a previous conversation and provide that one-to-one personable experience that people actually call help desks and even speak to individuals and want individuals for, because they just know the background of the story. Amelia can build that context on a humanistic level. And then you've got the process memory. We've seen that in action, right? Several processes we go through, we transfer money, we create and ensure that our processes are governed and unified. When you actually have people on a global service desk, it's very hard, both from an onboarding standpoint, to ensure that everybody's doing the same thing and the right thing when they're having a conversation with a client. And it's also very important that they're doing the right thing in general, and that you understand how each interaction is going with your business and the client, be it if it's an external use case. So ensuring that the same consistent process is followed is key. And then you've got the emotional ontology, that apathetic memory, which means that you react to a situation in a human-like way. When I said something terrible happened to me, Amelia turned around and said, sorry to hear that. What we're actually doing with that emotional memory and that emotional EQ, we call it, data, is that now what we can do is not only say, okay, we're doing a process right, but we can tie EQ levels to a certain process. So I can now say, oh, okay, well, not only am I doing it right, am I doing it well? Are people liking the way I'm delivering this service, this process? And then you can drill down even further and go, well, what is it in there that's making them angry more often than not? What is the irritating question that I ask? Where do they get stuck? Do we need to change our verbiage? Are we being too internal speak and not enough external speak, so that other people outside of our organization understand and stuff like that. And that's where EQ really comes invaluable over time. Because you'll know when you're doing something right, but are you doing it well? It's extremely hard to get CSAT results and NPS scores because people have to actually go out and do that for you. Whereas with EQ, you're tracking what people are doing anyway, which is just having a conversation. And then obviously the analytic memory, being able to compile data at that extent and being able to take things like FAQs and PDF files and turn them into general knowledge, being able to upload a Wikipedia and have Amelia give you generic answers to whatnot, but more importantly, looking at analytics overall to understand what are the things people are calling about, and what are we trained on versus what did we maybe have to escalate to a human because we just didn't know the answer, or we weren't being asked it in the way that we were expecting, and so we had to do a misunderstanding and go, okay, well, let me see if my colleague knows what you're talking about. And that's how you grow and iteratively improve the AI over time through feedback, input, and then output.
So these 5 elements are what I would think the core differentiators with what Anthony said earlier, a chatbot and an AI. Because a chatbot is all about, let's say, IVR on steroids. So instead of 100 categories, you might now have a couple of thousand categories, but still about recognizing keywords and then boom, just responding to it. What you see here is with these 5 elements, they all are involved. If you have one conversation with Amelia, she will use all these 5 elements. And most of them in parallel even, which is also how our brain actually works, right? So you're now actually watching our presentation, right? And you will have some emotions around it. Some will say, oh, where are these drinks now? Guys, can you not stop? Others will actually be very passionate because you share our passion about AI. Well, in parallel, actually, your semantic memory, you're storing elements. Well, you might be even on your phone quickly doing your expenses, following in a process, your own process memory. And that's actually also how Amelia works. So she will, when you have a discussion like within banking, all these elements are working in parallel to make sure you get the right answer, you get also the most human answer, and that she truly understands you. And what we first will show you is her semantic memory.
This is analytic, yeah. Sorry, I'm just doing it a little bit. We don't need to show semantic memory.
Okay,
We've
you
already
want
seen
to
it.
say,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
good.
It's boring. But analytic memory,
I don't think so. But
he's my boss.
Question that you're going because you're kind of covering a lot of stuff.
yeah, we have 11 minutes, but we are more than happy to delay the drinks and overrun completely. No, go ahead.
The emotional quotient we talked about.
yeah.
When is the voice going to become more human-like? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it, but still, the voice of Amelia is irritating to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So how fast you think, in how much time, in months, will Amelia be, it'll be different, it'll be difficult for a person to differentiate Amelia from a real human person talking?
Yeah, we actually are doing that now in stages. So we first actually have decided to work on her avatar and all the movements of the avatar. That will be done in October, and then we will actually look also at the voice element of it. But we first want to make sure, because what we see in practice, not many of our clients actually they shut the voice down, so they have the interaction as you see, but not with the voice.
So there, in that case, what about emotional quotient you talked about, but individualizing it, or at least having customer profile based emotional quotient reaction?
Can you actually go to the EQ one? Sure. We already actually have that, so we actually profile you already. So there are three elements. You can see them. You can see, yeah, it's too small. Yeah. You can see it if you look very carefully, and if you're on the first row. Well, you see three levels. You see, you see pleasure, arousal, dominance. That's the framework we use. But you see emotion, mood, and personality. Your emotion, what we do is by utterance, we actually look at, okay, you're super happy, not super happy.
Got it.
We average it out, and we see, okay, in what mood are you? Because if you're structurally very agitated, you probably are agitated, so it's not the one thing you respond to. If you are someone who, on a regular basis, for instance, logs in, and we recognize you as a recurring guest, we actually will build your personality profile. So, for instance, with Anthony and me, Amelia is quite informal, where with other colleagues, where she interacts a lot with, she's a bit more formal.
Perfect.
Yeah.
One other question. Is it built natively on your own data, or are you using other kind of... So where I'm going with this is 1 in every 5 search today is on Google is happening on voice. So Google's ability to have more data to decipher context and intent, well, it's directly proportional to the data that you have. I mean, after a point, of course, it plateaus, but we're still a long way from there. So are how are you leveraging that, if at all you are, or are you building it all natively on your own data, about deciphering context and intent?
No, we use, it is both. So we use actually different types of sources. We use public sources, open source type of platforms, etc. For instance, to recognize concepts, there are all kinds of platforms outside of Amelia which will, for instance, recognize, okay, an acquisition is always involving a mother company and a daughter company, for instance. Right, so we use that type of context. We use also, especially research institutes have a lot of those libraries, so that's definitely what we leverage as well. Plus we build based on all the conversations Amelia has also our own knowledge bases. So we combine actually the two. Yeah.
Is it domain-based?
Can you define what domain for you is?
Insurance industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So for instance, we, in our process ontology, for instance, we use what we call entity classifiers. So our whole, the reason why we can have dynamic, maybe I'm going too deep now, sorry. But the reason why we can have dynamic workflows with context switching and spread activation is because it's completely machine learning and deep learning enabled. And those are based on what we call entity classes, and those entity classes are often industry specific. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually to that end, because I'm in delivery actually, so I run implementations of Amelia, and so firsthand we have got a lot of the data now that we've got experience of, that we've pulled in, and so what happens now is that our time to delivery, as it were, our time to value for a production implementation is around 6 to 8 weeks. In fact, and at that point we'll be above 60% accuracy at least. And now it's getting even higher because our data sets are growing as well. And so that means that usually within 8 to 12 weeks, we're at a point where we're over 90% accuracy. And in fact, my entire delivery team is measured on accuracy, and they make bonuses based off of how cognitive, and coverage, how cognitive they make Amelia. And so as a result, what ends up happening, and what has happened in several service desk situations, is that now we've taken over 75% of the total annual call volume with Amelia. You know, think about the market that can have, and that we did that in under 6 months. So that's huge. That cost reduction, that time to value, you don't need to change user behavior, have them going to the same places that they're still going, but instead now you've got Amelia doing it as opposed to somebody manually sitting there and doing something mundane like a password reset or something like that. Okay, so let's take a look. So what I've got here in front of you, and we're nearly done. I've got like 5 minutes left on this, so we'll try and keep it sweet and short. And
I was just
whatnot.
told we can run half an hour over, so it's.
Oh, okay. Oh, great.
I'm kidding.
So I'll keep talking then. So what you've got here is an example of analytic memory. What we hear is still a banking scenario, but maybe let's see if we can get approved for a mortgage. And so one of our use cases that we can talk to is that the mortgage pre-approval process is a huge one for consumers, right? And there's a lot of dependency on a lot of data sets. But if we can leverage Amelia's analytical capability to take a bunch of approved and not approved mortgage applications, throw them into Amelia, we can begin to decipher what are the thresholds of, the average person who. So if you see here you may not be able to see it, but you got here on the right, credit score, age, dependence, yearly income, basic things. But we can scale them so that based on our knowledge of approved mortgage applications and whatnot, there is a likelihood that as long as they get into one of these good areas and at least 2 or 3 of these areas, they're likely to get approved. So we can give them pre-approval. They can then go on and get their house. It makes the whole process less stressful, and we know that we've got accurate data because not only have we gone through the right process, but we're integrated into the correct system. So if we run through this in a practical context and say, I'd like to see if am I writing approved? I want to make sure I don't make any spelling mistakes, just because I'll speak in British English again, because Lord knows that would be awful.
Let me look up your information real quick. Looks like I have the information I needed from you. How much mortgage would you look for?
If you give it a number, Mute, and I'll just explain. So what actually is behind this is we got mortgage data from a bank, right? So, and what often banks have, they have a mortgage system and they have a pre-approval system, and they need to keep the logic consistent. This is a completely different approach. We actually asked the bank, okay, you have your mortgage system, just give us your most recent mortgage requests, both people who were approved and not approved. And we let our analytic engine run and decide what are the 6, 7 most important variables to predict if someone is eligible for a mortgage or not. Amelia gets those 6 variables and will now ask you those variables. Now in this case we're logged in, so she actually only needs to know the value of the house because she will have your salary and all kinds of other elements. If not, she would actually ask you the 2, 3 missing data points, which is a completely different way, right? There's no programming at all. We just run the analytics, we upload the model, she knows the variables. We might need to train her a bit on what the definition of a specific variable is, and that's it. Yes?
But some of those variables are probabilistic, and therefore you're getting this 98.5% although.
Yeah, because it's a pre-approval, right? So we have to be clear. So you're pre-approved if everything, and this part is in banking.
Also hard set something, right? I mean, when
Yeah,
you run
absolutely. If you say,
hard set that yes, run probabilistic on these 25 factors
exactly.
with different weightages, which can change over time on a supervised learning maybe.
No.
But also make sure if this person does not have, I don't know, a credit history of more than 600, then straight away go ahead and that's a binary decision.
Yes, so you're spot on. So what we can do is we can run, for instance, do 2 models in parallel. We can always say, first check credit rating. If that's high enough, then we're fine. If it's sort of in the middle section, then run the rest and ask for it when you miss variables. Yeah.
And this can be done by the people in operations, the user interfaces.
Yes.
They can easily do that. It
Yes.
doesn't require a huge
No. Well, in this case, you need to have a little bit of data science knowledge, right? Because it's analytical. But yeah, no, it's very easy. Yeah. Yeah. So if you know, for instance, SPSS or something, you'll be able to run it. Yeah.
Let me just refresh this. So we've got a minute left, so let's have a little bit of fun. Just that's why I refreshed it. So let's look up Mickey Mouse. Okay. Mickey, where you are, Wikipedia. Okay. We're going to just copy and paste this. Okay, and we're going to show you some of Amelia's semantic memory capability here, what is called the SEMnet, essentially.
Maybe ask first.
Hello, Anthony.
Or maybe ask first a question.
Sorry?
Maybe ask
Oh,
first
yeah, that's a good
question.
idea, yeah. So I go, who? So you can see there's no programming here. I'm not pulling the veil over your eyes. Who is Mickey Mouse? She's thinking.
I can't say. Anthony Evans. I just can't say.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the entire paragraph to Mickey Mouse. And
No, you give it to Amelia, and it's about Mickey Mouse.
well, Mickey Mouse, yeah, sorry. It's the end of
No,
the day,
that's
Edwin. It's like 5:25. I was supposed to be in the bar 25 minutes ago. Anyway.
Yeah, but there's no bunkers bar here
I'm
in New
English,
York.
I'm far too
so-
sober for this time of day.
Oh.
So let's go over here and see what we've got. So Mickey Mouse is a funny cartoon character. Okay, so let's see. Who is Mickey Mouse? Okay, she's thinking about it. She's going to go through, because we've added all of this now into her memory. She's got to decompile it, configure it, but it's gone in.
A
She's,
funny animal cartoon character.
And so she's got it. There we go. You see, you like that? Like that? That one worked. but no, this is funny and whatever, and it's great. It's a good example though of how you can take flat data, throw it into Amelia, and instantly get value out of it. Now, I don't like these kind of use cases, generally speaking, may not make a lot of value from a business standpoint, especially if they're like FAQs that deflect people to like a self-service tool or a phone number somewhere, because you're basically just handing the problem to somebody else still instead of giving it to Amelia and allowing her to take ownership. But let's say you've got a new car engine that you've got deployed, and you need to ensure that people are aware of warranty information and people are aware of potential health risks when using a certain product and whatnot. You may want to have some of that flat data hidden within like Amelia, so that if people ask the question around those products, they can get the straight answer that they need, because sometimes it is just a Q&A session. You know, somebody calls up just to get a quick question answered. And this is a good example of how Amelia can do that.
And maybe since we only have 2 minutes left and all the red lights are burning here, maybe...
Okay, let me, one more thing. What happened in 2009? And so, just to kind of show, in 2009, Disney began to rebrand the character again. So, if I say, what happened in 2009? She's thinking about it again. But again, this is like totally contextual. Like, she's been given the sentence, and now she's going to look through it again.
Disney began to rebrand the character again by putting less emphasis on his pleasant, cheerful side and reintroducing the more mischievous and adventurous sides of his personality.
Who noticed this since 2009? That's I didn't. No, but what you see here is the application behind it is this is coming extremely close to how we train our, for instance, on FAQ. And again, I don't know. You I think asked is, do you now need high-tech people? No, you need linguists for this. Right, so you need linguists who write good text. Right, we sometimes link those texts a bit to questions, so to help the search, but that's about it. And this is how you train on FAQ. And why are FAQs, again, important? Not so much as an FAQ case only, because what Anthony is saying correctly is, if we have Amelia operating and doing only FAQ, customer satisfaction is lower than when she actually solves the problem. So very practical example, can I add a driver to my car policy? And Amelia says, here's the link, now go do it yourself. Quite bad customer satisfaction. If Amelia says, sure, what's the name of the driver? And runs the whole thing through with your insurance systems, very high customer satisfaction. But still, at one moment, Amelia might say, can I have the social security number of the new driver? And you might say, why do you want this? And then first of all, what is this? Right? And Amelia just understands, she just asked a question about the social security number, so she will link this to social security number, and she would go to this part of the memory, so she would switch from her process memory to her SEMnet to look up the answer for that question, give it back, and then say, can I now please have the social security number? And again, so this is why we say the whole notion about what the fourth element of the value is, make the learning so easy that people who are currently, for instance, doing content management on a website can do a large part of the training. Sorry, I saw a question there.
Yeah, so in this example, what happened in 2009, you didn't really say what happened with Mickey Mouse in 2009.
Yeah.
So if you had fed her data for several different topics at all
Right.
in 2009, would she
That's a good
know
point.
the most recent? Or would she find all of them? Or would she
She would probably pick the first one of what she found, yeah. Or, yeah, that's probably what would have happened. This is why if there are several, so how we would train her, let's say there are 5 different things which will, let's say she would be trained in what happened with Mickey Mouse in 2009 and Donald Duck in 2009 and Goofy and all the other guys. We probably would have said, we would have split it a bit more and just label, say, okay, with 2 or 3 questions to give her a little bit of help. Okay, these are the type of questions. Yeah, but those 3 questions combined with the text and then the whole machine learning behind it and deep learning behind it will extrapolate it into hundreds of variations of those questions. So it's not that you have to think about 100 of variations, you need to think about a couple. You need to make sure that they're very different, the type of questions, and then the whole machine will do the rest. Yeah.
Quick question.
Sorry, 2 questions. That sounded almost like...
Quick question. Is or will Amelia be trained, to understand slang, idioms, sarcasm in the future, or is it something that you're working on
currently? It's a great point. We can train her already on slang because that's different types of wordings, and so there we can integrate that in the way, for instance, we train her on intent recognition. Sarcasm is the next level. Yeah. So to understand New Yorkers really, that will definitely take a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to kill me, or do we need to stop? I think we have to stop. So thanks a lot. I will answer your question one-on-one. So I'm here still for the drinks. We're both here for the drinks. So just if you have questions, just come to us. And then thanks a lot for your time.